You gotta love a great villain. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris and welcome back to another video. So today I'm doing a tier list ranking of all of the MCU villains. Now I want to specify this is from Phase 4 onwards, so I'm not including Thanos or anyone from the Infinity Saga. This starts with Black Widow and ends most recently with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I'm only doing movie villains, no TV show villains. There's about 15 or so here to talk about. It's going to be a fun one, but before I do, be sure to hit that like button. Comment down below your favorite MCU villain from Phase 4 or 5 so far, and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell as I'm trying to reach my goal of 75,000 subscribers here on the channel. I'm very, very close. It would mean a lot if you guys could help me get there. Without further ado, let's dive into this tier list. Alright, so the tiers I have today are best of the best, great, solid, meh, and bad. These are the typical tiers that I do here on the channel. Again, I have these villains randomized, so there's no specific order to this madness. But let's go ahead and start with Doc Ock, who is one of the 5 villains from Spider-Man No Way Home. Obviously, Alfred Molina plays this character so well in the 2004 Spider-Man 2 movie. He came back here, and he's like the least villainy of any of these villains that return, because he sort of becomes a hero in a way when he snaps out of it, you know, in that one scene in the apartment building. Now, I still have to put him in great, even though his function in this movie isn't really as a villain. As a character overall, he's just so incredibly well written, and we get that callback where he sees Peter and he's like, "How have you been?" It's so sweet to see the two of them, Tobey's Peter Parker and Doc Ock, reunite. And it's so heartwarming because obviously what happens with Doc Ock is tragic in Spider-Man 2, but this little encounter that the two of them have, it reminds us of Peter and Otto Octavius' relationship prior to Doc Ock being essentially possessed by his own technology and creation. So it was a really wonderful scene. He is a great part of this movie, so he deserved a spot in great. But next we have Kang the Conqueror, the villain in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and obviously this character is being set up to be the next Thanos as we move into, you know, the multiverse saga of the MCU. I would be willing to put this character in great because I think that he carried a lot of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Jonathan Majors played the character really well, and he has this commanding screen presence. Like, whenever this man walked in the room, I don't know about you guys, but me, I was like, oh. Kind of quivered in my chair a little. I was like, okay, everyone's getting silent, and he struck fear not only in the audience, me watching the movie, but in the characters. I mean, he just, with the movements of his finger, dominated Scott, threw him against the wall, and just like said, hey, I am the new big bad villain of the MCU, or at least a variation of me. And so that's why I have to appreciate it. A lot of the big critiques with this character is, he got defeated by ants? He actually didn't get defeated by ants. He got carried away by them, but he clearly comes back and still fights Scott Lang. Also, those ants were very, very advanced. Like, these were high intelligent species of ants that were developed for years and had a whole civilization. So I know their ants in the Ant-Man films are more of a goofy tone, and they're self-aware of that, but Kang still kicked ass in this movie, and they're setting him up to be, like I said, the next big bad Thanos-esque villain. So I'm gonna go great. I think I still go Doc Ock over him, though, just because I love Molina so much. I know that might be nostalgia, but I gotta do it. I gotta do it. Moving on, we've got Gorr the God Butcher, who's the villain from Thor: Love and Thunder. What a letdown this movie was, and unfortunately, the villain was as well. I love Christian Bale. I mean, he's easily one of the better actors of my generation. You know, growing up, he was my Batman. He played Patrick Bateman. He's done countless Oscar award-winning projects, and he finally got to have a crack at an MCU villain, and it felt like it was the wrong movie. I know a lot of people have said that, but it really did feel like it was the wrong movie. It's a very dark character who literally butchers gods, as his name would insinuate. It was just weird having him thrown into this Taika Waititi comedy that was really unfunny, like cringe-worthy humor at times. So I would have to go meh with Gorr the God Butcher. I can't say he's outright bad because Bale's giving it his all and he has some intimidating moments. I never loved the way that this character wrapped up, though, where Thor just ends up taking his daughter, and like, it was really bizarre to me that they went that route at the end of the film. In fact, the first 10 minutes of this movie does a decent enough job of establishing Gorr's backstory, but he's barely in the movie, and I feel like a lot of the Phase 4 projects fall victim to like having a villain fall to the wayside for some reason. So yeah, Gorr should have had a much meatier role. Moving on, we've got Dreykov, who's the main villain in Black Widow. I'm just gonna be 100% honest with you guys. I think this is perhaps the outright worst villain in the MCU. I'm putting him in bad. He is not only like generic and run-of-the-mill in general, like his line delivery, everything about him, but he's probably the least memorable villain on this list. In fact, I probably just unlocked a memory for a bunch of you guys who haven't watched Black Widow since theaters, and you were like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that guy's face in the movie. I can't even remember many of the lines this character says. When I think of a villain, I love to think of like, oh, I can quote them, or I remember this scene where they struck fear in me. Not the case with Dreykov. He's your stereotypical Russian villain, and he just didn't do it for me. Next, we've got Jamie Foxx's Electro, who's obviously the villain in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Comes over to the MCU, gets a bit of a makeover. He's got the yellow electricity, he's got a new hairstyle and everything. This is a pretty big improvement over his character Poulter from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which I think is a little bit of an overhated villain. I'd probably go solid with this version of Electro. Again, he wasn't great in the movie. Like, he's probably the third best villain in No Way Home. In fact, it was cool to see him interact with Andrew's Spider-Man again, and they had some funny bits, possibly setting up Miles Morales in the MCU. That would be awesome. Next, we've got the Scarlet Witch herself, Wanda Maximoff. She's obviously been a hero in the MCU for a while, but she took a villainous turn in Multiverse of Madness, and she was pretty hateable in this movie, I'm not gonna lie. I guess that's a trait of a good villain, though. She went off the rails in this movie. Obviously, in WandaVision, she created this whole false society where she had a family and a new vision, but it was all fake. She couldn't really handle that, so it took a toll on her, and she went off the rails. Fully lost it in this movie, unjustifiably committed acts of murder. I mean, you know, Camartage in the film, she's killing people left and right. She slaughters the Illuminati. She's on a blood fest, just killing anybody in her path just because of her own rage. I can't say that makes her a best of the best villain. She's definitely intimidating and easily one of the most powerful villains we've seen in the MCU. I wouldn't even go great. I would probably go top of solid with Scarlet Witch as a villain. Obviously, I like her much more as a hero, like during the Infinity War Endgame era, but she did take a dark turn. I think it's wild how many people come to the defense of Wanda, because there are a lot of other characters in the MCU who have experienced just as much, if not more, trauma than her, and haven't gone on these killing sprees where people are like, hell yeah, kill them all, Wanda. That's always jarred me. Next is the High Evolutionary, the newest villain in the MCU, the main villain of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I really appreciated this villain because we finally got a great Guardians villain, you know? Ronan and Ego were the two that we're going to compare him to, and he's far and away better than that. He's one of the most despicable characters, not only in the Guardians films, but in the MCU. He's committing these heinous acts on Rocket Raccoon and all these other animals. I've said this before, but there's rare instances where a villain will viscerally make me want to punch him in the face, and I'll be like clenching my fist watching him on the big screen. The High Evolutionary did just that for me. Now, I can't go best of the best with this character because an elite villain, like, I really want to understand where they're coming from, and for the High Evolutionary, it was just pure evil. You know, he's torturing Rocket, and he wants to perfect a society, essentially. That's his end goal. Not the most groundbreaking plan I've ever heard from a villain, but he is a very despicable person and evil, so that puts him in the great category. Also, he's more so Rocket's villain, less the Guardians villain. The Guardians are all there to defend their friend Rocket. He is more so just hell-bent on finding and capturing Rocket again so that he can get the information out of his brain. He's jealous of him. The envy shines in the final scene when he's sort of just projecting all of his insecurities onto Rocket. And because of that, I'm gonna put him in great. This is tough for me. I think I'd have to put Kang over him right now. This is like almost not fair because I know Kang is gonna end up being even better as he gets more and more appearances. High Evolutionary is a one and done type of villain where he's not gonna be, you know, a recurring villain throughout the phases. Again, it could be unfair, but I think right now, High Evolutionary is still in the great tier. Next, we've got Icarus. Spoilers for Eternals, I guess, but this is a character who is a hero for most of the movie. Then it's revealed he's a villain. But I've always loved Richard Madden since the Game of Thrones days. He's a great actor, and he brings it here. This is a character who's got so much inner conflict and struggle. What is right and wrong? Do I want to screw over the Eternals, or do I need to just do everything for Arishem? It's a very interesting struggle that he's going through throughout the film. I'd put him in solid, probably split the difference and go middle of solid. He's one of the more fascinating parts of the Eternals. Icarus in this film reminds me a lot of Superman, but a morally corrupt Superman. Next, we've got Green Goblin, who is my favorite Spider-Man villain, period. Like, Willem Dafoe's portrayal in the first Spider-Man film from 2002, legendary. The itsy bitsy spider. Because of that, I'm going best to the best. Now, it always feels weird talking about Goblin and all the other Spider-Man villains that appeared in No Way Home because they had a solid foundation established for them in their own films, not a part of the MCU. The reason Goblin is best of the best is because he comes into the MCU and he wrecks Tom Holland's Peter Parker's world, turns it upside down. He's responsible for the death of Aunt May. He's beating him to a pulp just like he beat Tobey's ass at the end of the first Spider-Man film. And there's so many lines I could quote from this character. Strong enough to have it all. Too weak to take it. Like, Willem Dafoe fully committed to this role, and I have to applaud him for that. It made for one of the more memorable antagonists in the post-Endgame era, and it was awesome to just see him back in action. In fact, he's got a new suit. He doesn't have that classic Goblin mask as it breaks early on in the film, but seeing him flip the switch is almost scary. Like, he comes into the movie, and we're like, is Goblin gonna be just a joke in this movie? Like, what's going on here? And then he flips the switch, and we get one of my favorite moments in the movie where the tone completely shifts. As Peter, like, reads the room, Goblin delivers bone-chilling line, "Norman's on sabbatical, honey." What a guy. He's got to go in best of the best because he's the villain that's responsible for making MCU Spider-Man suffer consequences and finally learn the pain that it takes to be Spider-Man. Juggling the life between Spider-Man and Peter Parker is hard, and Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin made Peter Parker in the MCU realize that. Next we have Arishem, who is kind of just looming over the Eternals movie. It's honestly a little confusing thinking about like all of the ins and outs of Eternals and the way that it even fits into the MCU. Like the film's fatal flaw is that it tries to introduce these concepts that rewire our brains and our understanding of the MCU canon and timeline. So thinking about it even kind of stresses me out. Talking about it right now, it's getting me a little worked up and anxious. But Arishem, I will put in meh because he was like not that memorable. He's this big celestial in the sky who's barely in the movie, and it was just bizarre, frankly. I would put him like at the front of meh. Actually, I think Gore probably is a more memorable villain. So Arishem, like this looming threat for sure, but is this character going to be in the MCU again? I have no clue. Next we've got Sandman, who is the best villain in the Spider-Man 3 movie, but in the MCU he doesn't have much to do. I'd go top of Matt. In this film, he's kind of just there, if I'm being honest. They were like, oh, let's bring back all the Spider-Man villains, and one of them will be Sandman, why not? And at first he's sort of cordial with Spider-Man, but then once Electro disappears, he's like, where did he go? Did you kill him? That switch always just made me laugh a little bit. Sandman, not one of the more memorable villains from this film, but I still dig his presence, just because of the nostalgia for Spider-Man 3, which I like. I don't care. I like that movie. Next, we've got Wenwu. I love this villain in the MCU. He was a strong point of the Shang-Chi movie for me because they open the movie with him essentially, and it's like a love story. Then we find out through flashbacks the tragedy that occurred in that love story and the rage that he was filled with and some resentment he even had toward his own son, which really makes for some tension between Shang-Chi and his father, especially in their final battle, which was epic. They fully explore his backstory and why he grows this resentment and hatred in his heart, and it's understood, and that's a rarity in the MCU. Sometimes villains are underdeveloped. That is not the case with Wenwu. I'm gonna put him in best of the best. I still take Willem's Green Goblin over him because that man is just the GOAT, but Wenwu, one of the stronger villains with ease in the post-Endgame era. Next we have the Lizard, who's the weakest of the villains in No Way Home. I would go the back of meh though, if I'm being honest. You know what, actually? I gotta go front of bad. I think that I still take the Lizard over Dreykov, but the Lizard not only has the least screen time, but it's the least important in the No Way Home villain return. I don't know why they even got him back, honestly. You know, he's barely in the movie. He's got a pretty decent jump scare, I'll give him that. Next we have Namor, the villain from Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Another one of those villains who gets his time to shine. They give us a full-on flashback sort of exposition dump scene, letting us understand him, and he does some awful things in this movie towards the Wakandans. He's responsible for the death of Queen Ramonda, which is heartbreaking. That is one of the saddest scenes in the film. I think he's great, and in fact, I would probably go top of great with Namor. They really did a great job of fleshing this guy out, and they really nailed the design here. He has got some great combat with Shuri at the end, and just the way he's able to get in people's minds. Namor is a great MCU villain. And last and possibly least is Taskmaster from Black Widow, a character that was really a massive letdown. I think that Taskmaster is probably better than Dreykov, but Taskmaster is a bad villain. Obviously, the whole reveal goes down that it is Dreykov's daughter, which was just bizarre. We get some cool action, especially in the first act of this movie, like on the bridge. The backstory behind Taskmaster and like the character's ability to learn and adapt to their opponent's fighting style is super dope. And they honestly didn't do too much with that, which was upsetting. It was more of a robotic performance, and there was almost too much mystery for its own good, and by the time the reveal happened, it just felt so out of left field that I didn't care and was pretty detached from that. There was so much potential with Taskmaster, but unfortunately I think the MCU dropped the ball with this villain. But that does it for my tier list ranking of all the Phase 4 and 5 MCU main movie villains. Let me know in the comments down below who your favorite is, your least favorite. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help me reach my goal of 75,000 subscribers here on the channel. I'm very close. It would mean a lot. Stay tuned for more content coming very soon, and until next time, I'll see you guys later.